Recording in progress.
Good morning. On behalf of COPEAM, I wish to welcome you all and thank you for joining this online conference today. Before the works open, I will give you some useful information about the platform Zoom and its webinar function. First of all, kindly note that as attendees, you will not be allowed to use your camera or microphone. In the toolbar below, you will find different icons. Through the chat icon, you can send messages to the other attendees in public or in private. If you need technical assistance, you can use the chat function to talk in private with the user called technical support. If you wish to ask questions to the panelists at the end of this session, you can use the specific button Q&A. Your questions will be collected and then delivered to the meeting moderator. To facilitate the process, please specify to whom you wish to ask your question. Due to time reasons, kindly note that just a limited number of questions will be answered. Finally, the working languages today are French and English. By clicking on the icon with the world shape, you can access the simultaneous translation and choose your language channel. Thank you very much for your attention and good webinar to everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Au nom de la COPEAM, je tiens à vous donner la bienvenue et à vous remercier pour votre participation à cette conférence en ligne. Avant de commencer, je vais donner quelques indications utiles concernant la plateforme Zoom et l'utilisation de sa fonction webinaire. En premier lieu, en tant que participant, la plateforme ne vous autorise pas à utiliser votre caméra ou votre microphone. Dans la barre d'outils ci-dessous, vous verrez différentes icônes. À travers l'icône Chat, vous pouvez envoyer des messages aux autres participants en public et en privé. En cas de besoin d'assistance technique, vous pouvez utiliser la fonction chat pour parler en privé avec le support technique, nommé Technical Support. Si vous désirez poser des questions aux panélistes à la fin du débat, vous pouvez utiliser le bouton Q&A, questions-réponses. Vos questions seront collectées et transmises au modérateur de la réunion. Pour faciliter ce processus, veuillez préciser à quel panéliste vous souhaitez adresser votre question. Les langues de travail aujourd'hui seront l'anglais et le français. En cliquant sur l'icône Monde de la barre d'outils, vous pouvez accéder à la traduction simultanée et choisir le canal de votre langue. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention et bon webinaire à tous.
Good morning and welcome to COPEAM's
28th Annual Conference, which for the second and hopefully the last time will be taking place in remote mode due to the pandemic restriction. You have just had a glimpse of some of this year's activities, but first of all, we have a short welcome address recorded by Mrs. Marinella Soldi, President of RAI, that I would like to thank for hosting our works. Let's see it.
A greeting to all of you, and apologies for not being live and in person. As the newly appointed chairwoman of RAI, I'm a firm believer in the power of dialogue and mutual recognition, in whose name COPEAM was funded and built. Cooperation among Mediterranean broadcasters is a unique occasion for deeper understanding among nations and for sharing know-how, technologies, storytelling in the end, and values. It has not always been easy to achieve this goal. The Mediterranean area is an extremely diversified and rich landscape with great plurality of languages, religions, cultures, and therefore points of view. Nevertheless, RAI has been firmly committed, as all of you are, to find richness and benefit from this diversity. And there has been some celebrated achievements, of which two particularly stand out. The co-production of documentaries, over 80 of them, with significant cultural standing, non-fictional stories that dig deeply into the reality of our countries and help our audiences understand each other and connect. The training programs, which have involved more than 1,000 professionals, mainly journalists, from Maghreb and the Balkans, are especially powerful and necessary as well, as we face the almost existential and common challenge of digital transition and transformation. I look forward and I'm confident that our joint efforts will continue to bring excellent results and will eventually improve the cultural impact of our work.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now I wish to give the floor to Simona Martorelli, our ange gardien and Director of International Relations and European Affairs at RAI. Please, Simona.
Thank you so much. You make me laugh for the ange gardien. I wish I were. So anyway, dear colleagues and dear friends, first of all, I would really like to thank you for being here even if virtually. No doubt in RAI, we all wanted and have preferred to host you in person and shake hands and hug you. But again, we're still committed to comply with the rules of COVID-19. Nevertheless, we're really extremely pleased to host and welcome COPEAM's 28th annual conference. The path we have taken together since COPEAM first set up in 1996 has been a long, exciting and very fruitful one, and it still is, of course. With this association, RAI has built a tight, solid bond, which has grown stronger over the years, and we're all aware in RAI on how differences can enrich our life and cultures. We must treasure the legacy of the Mediterranean area, its culture, different religions, as has been said by our RAI's chairwoman, Mrs. Marinella Soldi, and different ways of lives, but our differences stem from a common matrix. We're there to witness this today. Treasuring, preserving, and developing this legacy is what public service media stand for. And since the beginning, and now more than ever, actually. Today, I would like to thank COPEAM for expressing and reminding us through the topic of this conference the core meaning of a partnership, to exchange experiences, to confront on differences, even to share problems and challenges. This is the best way to reaffirm the bonds that connect us. COPEAM's conference for 2021, Media Narratives for Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue, comes in a topical moment for the life of our countries and societies and represents a choice of deep significance from COPEAM. Due to the progress in communications that foster the faster exchange of ideas and habits and lifestyles from a corner of the world to another, we can say that the whole Mediterranean world has entered our homes, and public service media represent the gathering place and an occasion of dialogue without borders for all of us, a bond that we have strengthened over the years. The art of memory is the art of attention. This is what Samuel Johnson stated, and therefore, without further ado, welcome again, dear friends, and enjoy the conference with all the attention it deserves in order to make it a memorable moment. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Simona. I'm now glad to present a video message by Mrs. Gabriela Ramos, Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO, who will highlight the importance of preservation and promotion of cultural and religious diversities in the world. She will speak about some actions UNESCO implements and promotes globally and in the Mediterranean region.
Mr. Claudio Capon, Secretary General of COPEAM, Madame Marinella Soldi, President of RAI Radiotelevisione Italiana, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to address this distinguished audience on the occasion of the 28th Annual Conference of COPEAM. For more than 30 years, COPEAM has promoted media cooperation by harnessing the power of the cultural diversity of the Mediterranean region. The theme of the conference this year, focusing on media narratives for intercultural and interreligious dialogue, is key to promoting peace, accelerating sustainable development, and promoting mutual understanding in and across societies. It is aligned with the ideas of tolerance and respect that underpin the UN Decade for Rapprochement of Cultures, spearheaded by UNESCO. The decade will end next year, but its purpose has never been so relevant. More than ever, we need to make the most of the media to inform, to connect, to understand, to bring together the future and the past, and to shed light on the role of intercultural dialogue as a tool for innovation and cohesion in our societies. This is especially true in a world hit by COVID-19. The pandemic has shown how human ingenuity can be creative and make the best of technologies to improve communication and unite people from different parts of the globe. But it has also enabled the rise of hate speech, online and offline, threatening the very fabric of our societies. Intolerance and discrimination has gained ground, boosted by disinformation. We see this increasing hate speech, nurturing racist attitude and stereotyping, signaling religious cultures, affirming that different communities cannot live together to share common values. We see violent extremists continue to undermine peace and affect people of all ages, genders, cultural and religious affiliations across the world. We see independent and pluralistic media threatened and journalists killed. Women journalists and media workers are hit hardest. Whether working in the field, online, on the newsroom, they are more prone to sexual harassment or moral abuse and harassment, or even to be forbidden to being journalists, as it is happening in Afghanistan. The situation is further aggravated when coupled with cultural and religious discrimination. Exclusion is also present when we look at gender representation in the workforce. A study from the Reuters Institute, published last year, pointed out that only 23% of top editors across 200 media outlets in 10 countries worldwide were women. 23%. Will we accept to continue with these divides concerning culture, gender, and religions? Or will we, as a single human family, fight against these forms of prejudice and discrimination to stand up for human dignity? We need to respond to this firmly, with innovative ideas and concrete action to change mindsets while leaving no one behind. This idea stands at the heart of UNESCO's mandate to consolidate a culture of peace based on the respect for human rights. This is why UNESCO is preparing a roadmap to respond to the global call against racism and discrimination launched by our member states. A global forum attended by world leaders and experts last March on this subject, and to be replicated every year, is also part of our efforts to promote lasting and inclusive peace. Ladies and gentlemen, in these turbulent times, when we see societies struggling with the consequences of this social, economic, and sanitary crisis, we, and I am also referring here to the media actors, need to catalyze the positive message of unity in diversity. This is especially relevant for the Mediterranean region, a natural crossroads between countries, civilization, cultures. We have to draw on the historical lessons and highlight how dialogue forged the region as we know it today. We need to incorporate a variety of cultures and religions and make sure that they can live together. A fundamental part of UNESCO works is to promote the sharing of knowledge, so people can have reliable information for the understanding of history and the current challenges that the world is facing. It is in this spirit that UNESCO and the United Alliance of Civilization established the first international university network on media and information literacy and intercultural dialogue. This initiative, launched 10 years ago in Morocco, counts on the participations of universities from Italy, France, Spain, and Egypt, and is an important asset to provide cutting-edge research and promote capacity building on media and information literacy. It is fundamental to help young people assess critically what they hear and see on the internet. The younger generation are digitally natives. They are born into the digital world, but they need to learn how to grow up with it, behaving as true global citizens in full respect of human rights. This is why UNESCO organized, with the Anna Lindh Foundation last May, an outline training for intercultural competencies for young leaders in the Mediterranean region. Through our innovative story circles methodology, we are empowering individuals from all ages with the socio-emotional skills to step outside of their own logic and systems of thought, engage with others, and appreciate different cultural perspectives, and learn from them. Training of trainer sessions have already been undertaken in Tunisia, Egypt, and France, and I invite all of you to join this initiative. Another concrete example of UNESCO's action with youth from the Mediterranean region is the project developed with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism in Jordan, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. This initiative supported youth in strengthening their role as global citizens in peace building through the protection of cultural heritage, as well as the promotion on media and information literacy to detect lies and reject messages of hatred. In an age when the lines between the local and the global are blurred, it is not enough to get along with differences. We have to learn from each other. This is the spirit of UNESCO's work to challenge social and cultural norms and stereotypes which hamper the rights, freedoms, and well-being of women and girls, but which also affect men and boys. We need to live together, to act together, and to embrace cultural diversity as a wellspring of dignity and knowledge. We must share solutions, experiences, and aspiration as one single humanity. The media must play an essential role in this because they can give visibility to the dialogue and lay the foundations for better mutual understanding and greater tolerance. This is UNESCO's vision. Freedom of expression is essential for every society to lay the foundations of a peaceful world, and the award of two journalists, Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, as Nobel Prize winners this year is fantastic. I welcome that. I congratulate them, but it's also a fantastic symbol in this direction. Therefore, I thank COPEAM, and in particularly Mr. Capon, for highlighting in this conference the importance of intercultural and interreligious dialogue for the present and the future of the Mediterranean region. I wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
As an introduction to the general theme of our conference, we will listen now to Mr. José Manuel Pérez Tornero, President of Radio y Televisión Española. He would have liked to be with us today live, but because of a sudden and unforeseen institutional commitment, he is not able to be online. So this is why he sent us this video message.
Chers amis, collègues, c'est un plaisir d'être avec vous, en tout cas à travers de l'audiovisuel. J'aurais voulu vraiment être dans le moment et dans le temps de la conférence, mais je n'ai pas pu. En tout cas, laissez-moi me présenter. Maintenant, je suis président de Radio-Télévision espagnole, la télévision publique de l'Espagne, mais je viens d'un long chemin. Je suis été professeur à l'université de communication et de la sémiotique. Je connais bien la Méditerranée. Je suis une sorte d'activiste de la pensée critique de ce qu'on appelle l'éducation aux médias. Je pense que les médias ont, au moment actuel, une responsabilité énorme sur la paix du monde, et spécialement les médias, la radio et la télévision doivent contribuer à améliorer la vie à la Méditerranée. J'ai bien visité beaucoup de pays arabes et non arabes dans la Méditerranée, du sud, du nord. Je connais que c'est une région très compliquée, spécialement à ce moment-là. Compliquée en raison de la grande différence sociale entre le nord et le sud, en raison de beaucoup de migrations, en raison de conflits, guerres, problèmes, tensions sociales, provoque un nouveau choc culturel où la religion, où les différences culturelles se montrent quelquefois comme un problème. Mais je pensais toujours que le média, la radio et la télévision peuvent aider à résoudre les problèmes. Notre mission, c'est raconter l'actualité, raconter avec objectivité, avec liberté. C'est aussi de créer une narrativité commune, raconter l'histoire, créer des fictions et assurer que tout le monde progresse, que tout le monde apprend, que tout le monde peut faire face à un nouveau dialogue entre les gens qui, chaque fois, soient plus profités de nos sociétés, de nos institutions politiques et sociales. Je crois qu'à ce moment de la Méditerranée, nous ne pouvons pas perdre du temps. Comme gens de télévision et de journalistes, je crois que nous devons catalyser nos activités. C'est vrai que toujours nous devons échanger expériences, nous devons coproduire, nous devons faire plateforme de coopération, mais à ce moment-là, je voudrais vous proposer quelques actions clés qui peuvent déclencher une nouvelle activité et qui peut être très utile à résoudre nos problèmes. Je vous propose un ancien projet du COPEAM, c'est créer une université de l'audiovisuel de la Méditerranée. Nous pouvons faire ça en alliance avec beaucoup des universités. Nous pouvons partager des possibilités technologiques comme plateforme pour l'apprentissage en ligne. Nous pouvons promouvoir dans tous les Méditerranéens des stages de formation parce que la finalité de cette activité doit être double. D'un côté, relancer la formation digitale des professionnels. Nous sommes dans les défis digitaux, nous devons nous adapter au nouveau écosystème communicationnel et nous devons partager l'expérience, mais surtout nous devons créer une communauté culturelle, une communauté de journalistes, des hommes et femmes de la télévision qui peuvent partager quelques idéaux. Je crois que c'est très nécessaire parce que ça peut assurer la compréhension mutuelle et peut assurer la paix. D'autre côté, je crois que c'est très important à ce moment-là, lancer une grande conférence avec beaucoup de monde, institutions, gouvernements sur la question religieuse, sur la nécessité de lancer un nouveau dialogue interreligieux, parce que ce n'est pas seulement qu'on progresse avec la matière. Je crois que nous devons progresser avec l'esprit, nous devons partager la philosophie, nous devons partager les points de vue des diverses religions. Et je crois que les religions sont toujours une clé pour arriver à la paix, jamais un outil pour le sectarisme ou pour la division. Je crois que l'audiovisuel peut contribuer à faire de ce dialogue interreligieux une façon de construire l'avenir. Et dernièrement, je voudrais vous proposer le troisième projet que je crois que ça peut être très utile à ce moment-là. Comme vous savez, nous sommes en train de supérer, en train de faire face à la crise écologique, à la crise énergétique, et nous devons faire face à un nouveau stade scientifique parce que le Covid-19 a mis sur la table les problèmes de maladies, les problèmes de la nécessité de faire recherche scientifique et médicale. Je crois que nous devons mettre tous les outils de notre radio-télévision en faveur de promouvoir l'éducation et le progrès scientifique. Comment le faire? Avec la divulgation scientifique, avec l'engagement avec les écoles, avec un engagement de la télévision avec les universités. Finalement, je crois que ces trois activités peuvent nous donner un nouveau focus, un nouveau point de départ pour une initiative de coopération euro-méditerranéenne, dans le plan de l'audiovisuel, même dans le plan du cinéma, qui peut être notre force, notre plusieurs plateformes pour un nouveau dialogue que nous avons besoin plus que jamais. C'est pour ça que j'offre Radio-Télévision Espagnole comme un outil qui peut coopérer avec vous, qui peut nous aider à tous, qui peut vous aider. Je le dis avec toute sincérité, c'est le moment où nous devons agir. Merci bien pour votre écoute.
Let me thank the President of Radio Televisión Española for his very active, almost enthusiastic contribution. We will certainly take note of his many interesting proposals for our future initiatives. And now, I leave the floor to Marina Lalovic, herself an expert, journalist at the foreign desk of RAI News 24, the RAI information channel, who will moderate the panel, the central event of our morning session. Good morning, Marina. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Claudio Capon, for this precious and generous presentation. I'm very honored and pleased to moderate the first panel for the 28th Conference of COPEAM. Very flattered and exciting because I have been following the work of COPEAM as a real example of the multicultural approach towards a very challenging region, I can say, Mediterranean region. So we will have another challenge for the 1 hour and 50 minutes that we have at our disposal to tackle a very complex issue. So media narratives and how to boost intercultural and interreligious dialogue within the media. I would like to start before presenting our very precious guests this morning that are tackling and working from the different points of view towards this issue and this topic within the media by connecting our main topic of the panel, intercultural and interreligious dialogue, with one notion which could embrace it, so diversity, inclusiveness. Let's start with the question. How do we define diversity within the media? First of all, stating that diversities and the media today are lacking diversity is certainly not groundbreaking. But something has been changed when we started to be aware of this lack of diversities. As we could previously hear, some of the participants and media, very high media representatives, were talking about different aspects of diversities. So when we are talking about diversity, we can talk about gender equity, we can talk about migration issues, we can talk about sexual orientations within the media, and we can talk also about the disabilities. But of course, the topics are much broader, and we have to focus on different aspects of diversities. And we can focus to the structure, content, and the exposure. What does it mean? When I said that I'm particularly flattered to moderate this panel, this means that I'm involved professionally and personally towards this diversity inclusiveness issue, because I'm a journalist with a foreign background, and my career here in Italy started within a media environment which was completely dedicated to the migration issue. So one of the aspects when we are talking about diversity inclusiveness. What I learned by shifting from this media environment and today in the public broadcasting media, which is RAI, is that media and diversity inclusiveness is a process. We never arrive toward the complete covering of appropriate diversity, and that diversity reporting has to be distinguished by talking about diversity. That means that we first have to start from our self-awareness, how diverse, how inclusive we are as journalists or media operators, how our media environment is inclusive, and how we are exposing ourselves towards those who are involved into our content. One of the challenges that I learned through my career is that often diversity, inclusiveness, interreligious, and intercultural dialogue is a part of the niche parts of the media. So one of the main challenges of my opinion, is how to make this dialogue mainstream and available to the broader public, how to go out from the niche aspects of the media, and what can be defined also a corporate social responsibility within the media. Last but not least, also one of the aspects that is very important to underline when we are talking about such a complex dialogue as an intercultural dialogue is when we are going to stop to talk about it. So from now to 10 years from now, maybe this is going to be a natural part of the media environment. So we don't have to, we won't be able, and it won't be necessary to tackle it anymore. So as I said, this morning for 1 hour and 50 minutes, we will have a very precious guest, and we are very lucky, I might say, because our guests, which I'm going to present now, are actually covering the 3 different aspects when we are talking about intercultural and interreligious dialogue. So we will have an opportunity to tackle this issue with regards to a theoretical and university approach, and then we are having a guest as a media regulator, which in a tangible and concrete way changes the media landscape within the Mediterranean region. And last but not least, we will have the journalist itself, which is working on the ground and tackling this issue herself. So let me introduce you our guest this morning. First of all, Mr. Nuri Lajmi, welcome to COPEAM and good morning. I will present Mr. Lajmi. Is the High Representative of the Independent High Authority for Audiovisual Communication in Tunisia, HAICA, and President of REFRAM, which is the Francophone Network of Media Regulators. So we will have a very broad perspective towards the media regulators tackling this issue. Then with us there is Jelena Jurgačević-Kisić. Hello and welcome to COPEAM conference. Good morning. Jelena is a journalist herself, and she is a regional representative for Europe of International Association of Religion Journalists. She is also coming from Serbia, so we will have some particular and specific example with regards to the Balkan region. And last but not least, of course, is Federico Ruozzi. Welcome to COPEAM conference and good morning. Federico Ruozzi is an expert and affiliated researcher of FSCIRE, which stands for Fondazione per le Scienze Religiose in Italy, Foundation for Religious Sciences. So I would like to start precisely with Professor Ruozzi and by starting by tackling one of the principal obstacles, let's say, when we are lacking the self-awareness as a journalist, as a media community representatives, as spectators as well. So how to be aware that we are not inclusive, that we are lacking the interreligious and intercultural dialogue. So my first question for the Professor Rozzi would be, what does religious illiteracy represents today within the media? What are some of the tangible examples, and how do we tackle and fight this very huge issue? Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be able to speak at this conference. I start with a quotation. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. This is how John Lennon sang in 1971, becoming a lyric that imagined a world at peace. In that world of peace, there were no religions, with the historical discriminations that they brought with them. In 2021, however, religions are still there, despite the different theories on the secularization of societies, and they have taken on an enormous role in the public sphere, also for issues related to violence, as John Lennon imagined. History has been always aware of the nexus between religion and violence, not only in the old anthropologies, for example, of René Girard, Origins of Religion from Mimetic Violence, but also starting with the biblical tale of Cain and Abel itself, where in front of the altar, fraternity and fratricide coincide. Today, we are here to talk about media narratives for intercultural and interreligious dialogue. Talk about media and religion. I think that the big elephant in the room is religious illiteracy. I'd like to define religious illiteracy by giving also some examples. That what is religious illiteracy and why talk about religious illiteracy? I do not want to make a theoretical lectio magistralis, but let us remain on a concrete level. Well, according to a survey published a few years ago, only 30% of Italians knew the name of the evangelist, for example, and were able to put Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus in a chronological order, while barely 1% knew all the 10 commandments, and 85%, for example, of Italians say they were Catholic, but 70% had the Bible in their home, but less than 30% read it. This is the reason why 18% believe that the expression, for example, like Holy Grail, belong to the Bible. This is what is meant by religious illiteracy, beyond the definition that jurists, sociologists, and theologians have formulated. These data are very eloquent. I'm an historian, I work at the university, and I believe that, first of all, before talking about media and religion, it is necessary to make some premises and to look at the phenomenon from a historical perspective. Because religious illiteracy is, in the end, a lack of knowledge and competence about experiences of faith and belief. This is not a sociological fact, I think, but an historical fact. So our work, for example, at the Foundation for Religious Studies, the European infrastructure on religious sciences, kept focusing on this specific aspect, intertwining the educational system, society at large, the knowledge generated and produced by scholars, and the media, traditional media, audiovisual media, and now social media as well. School, society, and scholarship and media, the four of them all together are the pillar on which I believe any analysis on religious illiteracy and any attempt to reverse it should start from, avoiding the risk of picking one of them at a time, decontextualizing it, and very often blaming it for not being enough. What does religious illiteracy produce? Only cultural illiteracy? Unfortunately not. Because it is necessary to reflect on the social cost of religious illiteracy, understood above all as a lack of knowledge of the religion of the others, and not only of one's own. Commonplaces, prejudices, and lack of knowledge lead to cultural incident, conflicts in everyday life, tears in the civil community, and create obstacle to coexistence and social integration. And all these as a cost for society. And so the media have an important role in this. In fact, it is possible to calculate, for example, the social cost to the public health system of a patient who has contracted cancer from smoking and therefore decided to invest instead in anti-smoking campaign. If these campaigns are successful, in fact, it's easy to calculate the social revenue determined over time by saving on treatment. I think that it's more difficult to calculate the social cost of an obsolete education system compared to the needs of the labor market or of inadequate policies on, for example, civil rights, or the social cost of a bad media system. We see it in the long term. We see in the case of Senator Seger with an impressive return of latent anti-Semitism. We see it in the case of the European resolution on the importance of European memories for the future of Europe. And we see it every day on Twitter and on social networks. This is only one example among many. In point of fact, another example is the teacher or the school that does not know how to manage the issue of canteens, food precept, religious symbols, the veil or the Sikh dagger, religious holidays, thus producing a conflict, and this has a social cost. I'm from Reggio Emilia, and we saw this during the earthquake that hit Emilia a few years ago. Let me some examples. The local newspaper and television stations emphasize the problem that Muslims were creating in the canteens set up by the municipalities with their demands for halal food. Comparing, for example, comparing them with the Sikh, who, appropriately educated and reprimanded by the envoy of the Indian Council in Milan, have made do, as have Nigerians. The underlying a warning to make do thus ended up marking a boundary between bad guys who do not adapt to emergency and good guys more inclined to compromise. The event, albeit modest in scale, help us to outline the first picture that of the social cost of religious illiteracy resulting from a lack of knowledge and information spread by media. It could be argued that a 10th city of displaced person is exceptional situation, but it's a relevant example that can understand the issue of the social cost. Historical analysis show us that the reason for this lack of functional literacy about religion are rooted in a loss of critical and cognitive tools. The role of the media is strictly connected with the issue of education, I think. In the report on religious illiteracy published in 2014 by the publishing house Il Mulino, many history textbooks adopted in school are examined, and the conclusion is that rather than talking about illiteracy, we should, in this case, talk about a mediocre and standardized literacy on historical religious issues that we can find also in some television programs. I would like to suggest extending the investigation to philosophy textbook, making a small contribution. For example, the Bagnano Fornero has been for decades one of the most popular high school Italian philosophy textbook. In the last edition, after Greek philosophy and before Christian philosophy, we find a paragraph on the novelty of the Christian message, in which we read about the preaching of Jesus Christ. I quote, "To the law of the Old Testament, summarized somewhat simplistically in the saying, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, Jesus therefore opposes the new Christian law of love. On one side, so, end of the quotation, on one side, the old religion of revenge, on the other, the new religion of love. Or, for example, the use of the verbs chosen by the authors. In the past tense when referring to Judaism, in the present tense when referring to Christianity, as if Judaism were an experience of faith that is now over, surpassed by updating of Christianity. Faced with the most dramatic and complex problem, that what is needed is an increase in knowledge, training, and greater attention to country commonplaces. The encounter between cultures and faiths, the devices of dialogue, and the theologies of pluralism also suffer from the religious illiteracy that runs through this post-secular time, and that, above all, manifests itself in the approximation of languages, in which also the media have a responsibility. Think, for example, of the damage done by giving assassins and terrorists the license of radicals, as we hear daily on the TV news or in the newspaper. The word radical has nothing to do with terrorists, but it's a very noble expression in political and spiritual language, exactly as the preservation of the great moderation for spiritual people. In conclusion, I think that talking about media narratives for intercultural and interreligious dialogues means talking about religious illiteracy in the society and thus also in the media. And how media, together with the educational system, together with institutional policies, with the law on religious freedom, can stop or being vehicle of this religious illiteracy. Hence the importance, on the one hand, of the media studies, and on the other, of the religious studies for media professionals who want to deal with religion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rozzi, for these first examples towards what is religious illiteracy within the media, but also what are the social costs of it that are inevitably producing social conflicts. Some of the examples really show that. And also, last but not least, that the words are important, whether we are using it in a school as a professors and first of all as a journalist in the media or media operators. So I would now like to involve from this theoretical and not so theoretical, because there was so many concrete examples of the importance to be religious literate. We are going to shift towards the media regulators who are actually operating in the Mediterranean area. With Mr. Nouri Lajmi, I said before, he is the president of REFRAM, which embraces 30 countries from Africa, Europe, and North America, which is a francophone network of media regulators, and he is also president of HAICA in Tunisia. So first of all, let's start with the notion that is very difficult when we are talking about the dialogue, interreligious and intercultural, to distinguish between the freedom of expression and discrimination. These are two, let's say, the extremes of the narrative, everyday narrative of media regulators that have to find a kind of a balance. So my first question goes to that. How do you find the balance between those two extremes? And how do you enhance and how do you boost intercultural dialogue within a Mediterranean area that you are observing through your network? Thank you.
Bonjour, bonjour. Je vais parler en français.
That's perfect.
OK. Écoutez, d'abord, laissez-moi dire que je suis très heureux d'être avec vous ce matin. Pour la première fois, j'assiste à une conférence de la COPEAM, donc c'est un grand honneur pour moi. D'autant plus que le sujet que vous traitez dans cette rencontre est un sujet qui nourrit notre réflexion quotidienne en tant que régulateur, mais on se situe dans un cadre encore plus général, à savoir le discours de haine ou d'incitation à la haine, à la violence sur la base de discrimination de race, de religion, de genre, etc. Donc, en tant que régulateur des médias, donc, nous essayons de combattre le discours qui est diffusé par certains médias et qui, bien sûr, incite à la haine et incite à la violence, incite à la discrimination sur une base religieuse, etc., etc. Bon, c'est peut-être un peu différent ici en Tunisie par rapport à ce qu'on assiste en Europe, par exemple, où il y a tout à fait un courant islamophobe, par exemple, etc., qui, au cours de ces dernières années, a été vraiment au centre des débats dans plusieurs médias, etc., à la suite de plusieurs attentats extrémistes, violents, etc., etc. Ici, je dirais c'est presque le contraire. S'il y a un discours, c'est anti ce qu'on appelle les gens qui ne sont pas religieux. Donc, surtout depuis la Révolution, on taxe les gens de ne pas croire à Dieu, tout ça, d'être de très mauvais musulmans, etc. Dans le cas de la Tunisie, je parle. Hein. Donc, je vais commencer d'abord par le commencement. On dit la liberté d'expression, bien sûr, comme disait la modératrice, a ses exigences et tout ça, mais il faut faire la part des choses entre le discours extrémiste ou d'incitation à la violence et la haine et la liberté d'expression. Or, on a assisté ces dernières années en Tunisie, c'est vrai, à la consécration de la liberté d'expression, mais en même temps, on a assisté à de nombreux dysfonctionnements du discours médiatique qui, par moments, ont basculé vers un discours de haine ou l'apologie de la violence, de la haine, etc. Et bien entendu, c'est devenu d'une actualité très brûlante en Tunisie et dans beaucoup d'autres pays. Bon, peut-être au départ, je dirais quelques mots sur l'AICA, qu'est-ce qu'elle fait très, très brièvement. L'AICA, c'est une autorité de régulation des médias audiovisuels en Tunisie. Donc, c'est la première fois qu'on a une instance de régulation indépendante qui est consacrée par la Constitution, qui a été créée en 2013 et qui a bien sûr pour mission de garantir la liberté d'expression, mais aussi de défendre la dignité humaine, de respecter les règles du journalisme, donc les règles professionnelles, etc., etc. Donc, l'AICA préside actuellement depuis 2019 le REFRAM. Le REFRAM, c'est un réseau francophone des instances de régulation des médias qui regroupe une trentaine d'instances et qui, bien sûr, à force, bien sûr, de travail en commun, de concertation, etc., il a aussi focalisé sur le discours de haine, comment le contrer, comment l'éradiquer, tout ça. Et tout à l'heure, peut-être, je vais évoquer une conférence, un projet pilote que nous avons fait dans le cadre du REFRAM en 2015-2017 sur le discours de haine, et que ce soit à travers les médias traditionnels ou même à travers les réseaux sociaux. Donc, c'était un projet entre trois instances de régulation, à savoir l'instance de la Tunisie, du Maroc et de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, on en reviendra éventuellement. Or, ce qui nous amène à ça, c'est qu'effectivement, ces dernières années, ce discours a prospéré, y compris dans les sociétés, disons, de tradition démocratique. Hein. Cette problématique est donc aujourd'hui essentielle si l'on veut réfléchir et agir dans le sens du respect des règles professionnelles et déontologiques au sein des médias, prévenir les tensions et mettre en place les bases d'une société pacifique et démocratique qui garantit le plein respect des droits et bannit toutes les formes de discrimination basées sur la race, la religion ou le sexe. Donc, c'est pour ça que ces questions constituent dans notre travail quotidien. D'ailleurs, on prend souvent des sanctions contre les médias qui contreviennent à ces règles et incitent dans les contenus qu'ils diffusent à la discrimination des femmes, des différentes catégories socio-professionnelles, qui ne respectent pas les droits des enfants, etc., etc. Donc, c'est vraiment un travail quotidien et c'est aussi une préoccupation éthique et déontologique évidente pour nous, et parce qu'on s'inquiète en effet, ici comme ailleurs, de ces dysfonctionnements et de la défiance de plus en plus grande du public face à la manipulation de l'information. Vous savez aussi ce courant de manipulation de l'information, la désinformation, les fake news, etc. aussi a contribué à aggraver ce climat de défiance vis-à-vis des médias. Et bien entendu, aussi, les médias, malheureusement, tombent des fois dans ce discours-là. Le problème, c'est que pour nous, et pour les universitaires aussi, je suppose, pour tous ceux qui veulent faire des recherches, c'est que la notion de discours de haine et de violence elle-même se heurte à une difficulté qui peut apparaître comme rédhibitoire si on constate qu'il y a beaucoup de littérature sur ça, beaucoup de textes, etc., et si même le sens commun permet d'en cerner le contour, il n'existe que très peu de définitions du discours de haine, et certainement aucune qui soit universellement admise. Et ça rend un petit peu les choses un peu plus difficiles parfois pour nous en tant que régulateurs, pour les chercheurs, pour tous ceux qui font l'analyse du contenu. Quand est-ce qu'on va qualifier ça de discours de haine? Quand est-ce qu'on va mettre ça sur le compte de la liberté d'expression et d'opinion, etc. Donc, il y a eu bien sûr, quelques définitions ou quelques tentatives. Même, je vais parler aussi parce que il faut bien se référer à des textes internationaux. En l'absence de textes nationaux clairs, etc., il y a eu, bien entendu, au niveau des Nations Unies, on peut rappeler, par exemple, la recommandation générale numéro 35 sur la lutte contre les discours de haine raciale de 2013 pour l'élimination de la discrimination raciale, qui, bien entendu, stipule ou qui indique, en ce qui concerne, et je cite, en ce qui concerne la pratique du comité, les discours de haine raciale comprennent toutes les formes de discours spécifiques visés à l'article 4 qui sont dirigés contre des groupes reconnus par l'article 1er de la Convention, lequel interdit la discrimination fondée sur la race, la couleur, l'ascendance ou l'origine nationale ou éthique, notamment les peuples autochtones, les groupes fondés sur l'ascendance et les immigrés ou non ressortissants tels que les migrants, les domestiques, les réfugiés et les demandeurs d'asile, ainsi que les propos visant les femmes de ces groupes et d'autres groupes vulnérables compte tenu du principe de l'intersectionnalité et du fait que la critique des dirigeants religieux ou le commentaire de la doctrine religieuse et des dogmes d'une foi ne devrait pas être interdite ni punie. L'attention du comité a aussi porté sur les discours de haine proférés contre des personnes appartenant à certains groupes ethniques qui professent ou pratiquent une religion différente de celle de la majorité, telles que les manifestations d'islamophobie, d'antisémitisme ou autres manifestations de haine dirigées contre les groupes ethno-religieux, ainsi que, etc. Bon, c'est un peu long, c'est pas la peine de dire toute cette recommandation, mais il faut dire que les Nations Unies se sont penchées sur ces questions. Le Conseil d'Europe aussi, si le temps nous permet, on peut aussi s'étaler sur la littérature et les textes qui ont été produits par le Conseil de l'Europe. Ceci dit, au niveau national, et nous avons, dans le cadre du REFRAM, mené une enquête dans pratiquement tous les pays membres, enfin au moins les pays qui ont des instances faisant partie du REFRAM, nous avons constaté qu'il y a dans un certain nombre de pays des textes coercitifs, donc pour punir le discours de haine, etc., mais que cette notion de discours de haine ou d'incitation à la haine, à la violence, n'est pas toujours précisée d'une manière très claire, ni qui permet d'agir et de, bien sûr, des fois, la liberté d'expression est sacrifiée, etc., etc. Donc, la difficulté pour les régulateurs, c'est effectivement de faire la part des choses. Et c'est dans ce sens-là que nous avons mené un projet pilote 2015-2017 sur les pratiques dans 3 pays francophones, à savoir la Tunisie, le Maroc et la Côte d'Ivoire. Et nous sommes sortis, au moins en ce qui concerne la Tunisie, qu'effectivement, il y a une vague importante de discours de haine que nous avons monitoré dans les médias traditionnels, à savoir la radio et la télévision, et que le discours de haine anti-religieux est parmi les plus importants, donc d'incitation à la violence et à la haine, etc. Aussi, nous avons constaté aussi, même au niveau des réseaux sociaux, des vagues de racisme, un discours raciste et xénophobe. Donc, l'étude nous a aidés. Et l'étude était, comme disait mon collègue tout à l'heure, nous a servi pour faire de l'éducation aux médias, nous a servi pour faire de la sensibilisation auprès des journalistes, auprès des médias, pendant plusieurs séances de travail, de séminaires, d'interventions, etc., pour sensibiliser les journalistes et les médias sur l'importance de respecter justement ou d'éviter de tomber dans ce genre de discours. Et nous avons constaté ces dernières années, il y a eu quand même un progrès au niveau des médias traditionnels. Il y a moins, donc on relève moins de discours de haine et d'incitation à la violence. Et je pense que le travail que l'AICA a fait dans ce cadre-là, un travail d'encadrement, de sensibilisation, etc., a beaucoup aidé à mettre l'accent sur la gravité de cette problématique et pour sensibiliser les journalistes pour qu'ils fassent plus attention, parce que des fois, effectivement, les journalistes même ne se rendent pas compte. Il y a même des mots qu'ils utilisent qui sont dans l'inconscient et qui sont banalisés, qui sont utilisés même des fois sans prêter attention, mais qui ont des relents racistes, qui ont des relents qui incitent à la violence, à la discrimination, etc.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lajmi. Yes, because first of all, you emphasized and underlined the difficulty of defining what is actually hate speech. And by difficulty of defining this notion, it is also very obvious how it is challenging to put the boundaries between the freedom of expression and discrimination, but also you underline some of the positive shifts in the last couple of years, thanks also to your regulator within the country you are operating with in Tunisia, Morocco, and Ivory Coast, which are let's say the countries that are participating to this program started in 2015. Thank you so much also for these concrete examples and how difficult it is to put the boundaries in order to be more inclusive and to boost this intercultural dialogue. So you were at the end of your presentation mentioning also the fact of the lack of self-awareness of the journalists and how also the journalists have to be very aware of the fact of not being inclusive. So we are going now to invite one of them, Jelena Jorgačević-Kisić. As I said, she's a journalist herself, a regional representative for Europe of International Association of Religion Journalists. She's herself coming from Serbia. But first, my first question will go towards the challengings today when we are reporting on religion issues in Europe, since you are representing a very important European organization in that sense. So what is the current state of interreligious and intercultural narrative within the media, and what are the biggest challenges and biggest problems for the religion journalists in Europe nowadays, Jelena?
Thank you very much, Marina. It's a great honor to be here. I hope you hear me. Yes.
Yes, we hear you well. Thank you.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, I'm the member of International Association of Religion Journalists. So that is a global association established 9 years ago that promote excellence in covering the religion. I will try to give some overall picture, although it's quite hard because we talk about different contexts and different in terms of different relation between state and society, media and religious communities, and different relation between majority and minority religions, and also very different media landscape. And we should not forget that it's important when we speak about this issue to see what is, for example, level of state interference in control, and also do the dominant media narratives emphasize actually polarization? And if the answer is yes, of course, it will reflect also in the domain of interreligious dialogue or actually covering the way the religion is covered. And of course, there is a different position of dominant majority churches in society, which also plays the role while reporting on this issue. And maybe we will later have time to tackle it more thoroughly. And of course, different cultural processes. But I will try to highlight some points that I find interesting or it could be applicable or valuable. First, I would like to start the fact that there is a striking lack of scholarly papers, academic papers that deal with media narratives on interreligious dialogue. And this is the case with every content or discourse analysis. The absence of something speaks a lot, sometimes even more than the presence of something. So when it comes to interreligious dialogue, I don't know, in psychological field or from peace studies or for some concrete guidelines, you have a very decent amount of texts. But when it comes to media narrative, there is, I said, quite nothing. So what does it mean? That actually media, it's not, as we said, as Marina said, it's really not, the interreligious dialogue is really not the topic that is somehow highly covered in the media. And I would say, except the fact that media do not report enough about it, that the topic for itself, that interrelation between media and religion and interreligious dialogue, the importance of it is maybe not still fully realized. Although this is a trend that is changing, it's not fully realized. I will give just one short personal example. When I talked yesterday with one professor of theology from Belgrade, and I told him the topic, and he was thinking that I would talk just about the region, and his answer was media writing about interreligious dialogue. So what will you speak about? You can be quiet all the time. So it's not like that, but many people have impression that it's like that, which of course it has some reasons. Also, what I find important is there are not many, and also other speakers emphasize that from different angles, which is very important, that there are not so many journalists, and that is also experience of my International Association of Religion Journalists in Europe, that are specialized in covering religion. I'm talking now mainly about secular media. And, if you want to give the context, if you want to provide any analysis, to find adequate interlocutors, at least, to pursue the topic that is of the public interest, and to give some reliable comparison, it's for high importance to have specialized or actually literate journalists in the field. And we spoke about, it was speaking here about conference and trainings and the importance of cooperation, which I also think it's the role of media and religious churches and religious communities important here in their contact with medias. And we see how important it is that the journalists are educated in the field, especially in the period of crisis, when these usual challenges in reporting, challenges of superficiality, of stereotyping, of essentialization can have a very concrete and very dangerous circumstances, as all the crises are breeding ground for finding a scapegoat for reconstruction of these collective identities, who are we and who are they. And we saw that during the so-called migrant crisis and also this pandemic crisis, just from some other point of view. And also, I would like to say that we often talk about these topics also as a journalist when something already happened. So when we speak of the importance of it in post-conflict societies, for example, when we speak about when some traumatic event happened, and that is what brings the dialogue to the main stage. It's not about something just limited to the media, but I'm now talking about media, and it's hardly spoken about it before that as a kind of prevention. And that is, I think, that we as a journalist should think about, to produce such stories before and not after, just after it. Okay, and I often hear complaints that someone will say that just, journalism, that famous bad news is a good news, and that the media are not enough interested in this kind of, let's say, positive, constructive topics. And of course, from one point of view, it's totally true, and it's not just about limited just on religion, but on many other fields. But on the other hand, we have, of course, and public broadcaster and professional journalism who have to think about the public interests, and this is the topic of the high public interest. And I don't want to criticize also that is, even if it's not that is not highly covered in mainstream media outlets, I would say that this narrative about interfaith dialogue in Italy, in Spain, in some of the Balkan countries, and is something that is real. That there is some kind of consensus in society how much that it is important. Although, as I said, nothing enough, and also in the media. And it's very important also that media can convey these messages of religious leaders who are sending the message of tolerance, and that can really highly influence the image and really influence the public. And also, for example, we have now that with Pope Francis, that we also have in some countries of the Balkan regions that religious leader who really changed the whole narrative, I would say, to some point. Also, what I find interesting, I hope that I didn't criticize too much. I find when I spoke about that it's not enough covered, that it's actually really not covered. I found one interesting research, for example, in Spain, about media treatment of interreligious dialogue, their public service broadcaster from Corporació Catalana, and they researched actually their program for 4 years, and for the whole 4 years they find 41 pieces that deal with some kind of interreligious dialogue, and from that great majority was referring to the current affair, and the genre was informative. And all in all, the interreligious dialogue as such is actually mentioned in 6 pieces altogether, and it's a period of 4 years. And I think it's quite applicable to the other countries, that the majority of the news are actually provoked by the actual affair, and it's not very often it does not go deeper what is problem, and also that as it is shown here, the representation of the religious in the news and mass media is very imbalanced. Although there are several, let's say, positive stories, constructive stories. When I say constructive stories, not necessarily mean it should be positive, but it should be informative. It should be reliable, but their number is so small that comparing to the overall number of pieces, it's not strange that someone will say, when we speak about media narratives, what of interreligious dialogue, what actually are we speaking about? And
this is very interesting. I will just make a small digression, let's say, which is connected to what you are talking about, lacking the media narratives, but also when we are talking about the interreligious and intercultural dialogue, we are not only talking about the content, we are also talking about the media environment. So how diverse and how intercultural is our also newsroom, and that also inspires somehow what we are reporting and what we are sensitive about. So I'm going to stop you, Jelena, just for a second, because we have approximately another 20 minutes to finish our round table, our panel, and then we have 15 minutes for the questions of the public from home that are following us. So I would like to make another round with the question, starting once again from Professor Rozzi, by tackling maybe an entertainment industry. How do they boost intercultural, and interreligious dialogue like cinema and TV, or maybe sometimes are representing also the obstacles. I would also like to ask our participants just to briefly represent some of the, let's say, positive narratives with regards to our topic today, so we can give the floor also to the questions from home for those who are also following us virtually. Thank you so much, Professor Rotti.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think that the source of information in modern society is more and more often the media. We know, as Karl Barth underlined, media play a central role. Indeed, he stated, take your Bible and take your newspaper and read both. In particular, how religion are depicted in the media is of a vital concern. This goes beyond the mere correctness, I think. Nowadays, users base most of their knowledge on the images rather than the text. How many people today take the time to read the in-depth article, and how many simply limit themselves to reading images? For example, we only need to consider the impact in the social media of the photograph of a young Muslim woman apparently indifferent to the dead man next to her in occasion of the London attacks in 2017, and was later shown to be a fake news created by a troll. What impact do fake news have on the new generation? And how can we break the chain of hatred on social media? I teach also visual history at the university, and students today, despite being literate from a visual language point of view, do not have the tool for a critical reading, and we must provide them with it. There is a tendency to separate the religious question from other domains, as if religion were a sort of literary or film genre. It is not a separate category, as for instance, the one blockbuster used to classify film into romantic comedy, dramatic Western adventure, and so on. Yet, media use categories like politics, general news, sport, and obviously religion. But if you want to understand the events and give an account of them, we must go deeper and see religion not as an isolated sphere. Religion is intertwined with all the other social, political, and cultural dimensions. And clearly, in order to see this connection, a certain training and preparation, a familiarity with certain categories of analysis and phenomenon is presupposed. We can do an endless list of good example and bad example on how media depict religion, but I think that it can be more useful to try to go beyond the good and the bad categories, analyzing certain stereotypes in the media that are more cultural than religious. In Italy, for example, 5 daily newspaper titles were monitored over a 6-month period from 2017 to 2018 in a research coordinated by the University of Perugia. During that period, this title carried 6,234 articles dealing with the church and religion. The topics most frequently covered in descending order were immigration, poverty, bioethics, racism, the child abuse scandal, and the Middle East question. Based on that 6-month period of reference and on the informational context that was studied, the emerging idea is that of a journalism that gives preference to conflict, following the rule that bad news is good news because bad news attracts public attention more. From this article analyzed, there is a recognition that in terms of its authoritativeness, the church plays a leading role, particularly and only on social themes. The media only legitimizes the church to intervene in the public debate on particular topics. Consequently, it is only in those cases that the church is acknowledged as a voice. It is totally ignored on themes like work, for example, because religion is often considered by media as an isolated subject, and above all, for example, the Catholic Church as in a monolithic way. There is a tendency to ignore the religious rules of many events or to consider religion as an active part of the society. To do this is necessary, I think, to have the capacity to read the phenomenon in a deeper way without propaganda or superficial reading. I'd like to offer 2 examples of good practice, one linked to the past and one linked to today. The past is the Vatican II. Let's examine the case of the Second Vatican Council, which took place in Rome from 1962 to 1965. It was not only a religious assembly, Thanks partly to the modern means of mass communication, it naturally became a major media event at the same time. And in order to follow the council, Italian public television decided to rely on experts of theology and of history of the church and the council. The programs produced were important because through the voices of the historians, the bishops, the Christian observers, the theologians, show to the Italian viewers the theological and ecclesiological debate inside the Catholic Church, and though the history of the council unknown by most. An important element not to be underestimated is also the time these TV programs were broadcast. Most of these historical transmissions were broadcast after the television news in prime time at 9 p.m. On their television screen, Italian televiewers could watch the most important Transalpine theologians discussing the problem of Catholicism and Christianity. It was an important occasion for the Italian Catholics to acquire some knowledge on themes like ecumenism, the critical reading and analysis of the Bible, the role of the bishop, the liturgical renewal movement, or other direct expression of cultural, social, religious situation of the countries where the bishop came from. The poverty, the interreligious dialogue, the religious freedom, the theme of the peace and war, or to listen to the local churches spoken, like especially the bishop came from Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Area totally ignored by Italians due to their religious laziness and the traditional closeness of the Holy See and the Roman Curia, who monopolized and centralized the debate. The image of the church that this event showed on the television was totally new. It was a television that was not afraid to bring difficult topics to prime time, but it was also a church that was not afraid to talk, to confront, to discuss. And the council represents a new important interlude, because if during the 3 years of the council, the Italian television showed the Catholic Church in its universality, with its problems, its hopes, its natural different opinions, after the event, the Italian television concentrated again on the image of the Pope, dimming the collegiate church status, the ecumenical dimension, and the different voices inside the Catholic world. Furthermore, and here the second example and the conclusion. The relation between religion and media nowadays has to do not only with the religious information delivered by media. The relationship between media and religion is inherently connected with all the cultural facets, from the cultural with a capital C to a popular culture. What does that mean? In my opinion, it means we have to change the point of observation, because nowadays we cannot confine ourselves to the information that deals with religion simply as a phenomenon. As the theory of the facts of the media show, the type of information does not produce short-term changes of opinion and does not bring about changes of behavior. Over the long term, there are other elements that influence the collective imagination, like movies, cartoons, advertising, general interest programs. The images in glossy magazine are the agents that influence the collective imagination and deeply affect behaviors, habits, beliefs, and the rootedness of certain stereotypes that are cultural and therefore also religious, because they act on the construction of a collective imaginary. Just think of how the cinema has deeply rooted the figure of the tall and blonde Jesus in the West. In fact, religion has appeared more and more in entertainment and popular culture. In a recent television program on young people and religions, the interviewers' questions and the images were full of classic stereotypes. The Catholic priest was in a deeply spiritual context. Evangelicals always linked to the music, and the question about who paid their salary was asked only of the latter and not of the priest, and so on. This kind of narrative is more effective in the long run, in a negative sense, in entrancing certain stereotypes, as the lack of any reference to religion, Downton Abbey, for example, to the series Downton Abbey. In conclusion, watching the TV series Stiesel or Unorthodox makes you learn more about Judaism, in this case, Chassidic Judaism, and interreligious dialogue than books that nobody reads, for example, or the times in which the Rai column, Source of Life, edited by the Jewish communities, is confined. Experiments aimed at children are therefore welcome, such as those attempted a few years ago by Planet Kids, with during Ramadan aired cartoons on the Middle Eastern war, making the time of Ramadan day by day based on story and parable from the Quran, or Arabic language courses dedicated and tolerated precisely to the needs and learning of children between the age of 6 and 10. These examples are very effective in breaking down or avoiding prejudice in new generation. So, in conclusion, I think the film, TV fiction, and advertising have an enormous power to perpetuate certain stereotypes and to convey inequalities or discriminatory policy on gender, religion, etc., that affect and embed certain belief much more than the television, news, religious programs can do. So a bad film can create more damage than a bad article in the long period, I think.
Yes, because first of all, we are not used to see once again the news, like to rewind the news, but we might watch the movie a couple of times, so the legacy is lasting. And of course, I'm also thanking Mr. Professor Rozzi for underlying the fact that also closing diversity, inclusiveness, and interreligious topics into the so-called diversity bubbles is also very harmful. So we are actually risking to do what is one of the greatest challenges when we are tackling these issues, preaching to the converted. So the question is how to be more mainstream and how to get to the broader public in the natural way, not only within the certain kind of programs that are tackling religious or intercultural issues, or how to boost these contents, which Jelena was saying before, that we are actually lacking this narrative. So I would now give the floor to Mr. Nouri Lajmi. There are lots of questions actually arriving from our followers in a very virtual way from home. So I would now like to immediately give the floor to some of these questions. So to Mr. Lajmi, the question is how to deal with the possible extremist positions during the broadcast on set. So how to respect the diversities of opinions while preserving objectivity and professionalism. So how do you tackle this extremism, and can you give us, first of all, some of the tangible and concrete examples? And I would also then ask you, with regards to this question, another one that came from our follower Giacomo, which is connected actually to the previous one. You said that you also you are monitoring this social media as well, apart from the media, journalistic media. So how do you do this monitoring, and does HICA have a mandate to deal with the social media? And of course, the concrete examples are very, very welcome in order to understand better this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. Bon, pour répondre à vos questions, effectivement, l'AICA fait un monitoring des contenus, trentaine de personnes qui analysent, qui observent et qui suivent les contenus qui sont diffusés sur les chaînes de radio et chaînes de télévision. Donc, bien sûr, en priorité, les programmes en prime time, etc., les programmes qui attirent beaucoup de téléspectateurs ou d'auditeurs, ainsi de suite. Donc, nous suivons ces programmes et chaque moniteur a la responsabilité de suivre un certain nombre de programmes qui sont désignés d'une manière régulière par le responsable du service. Donc, bien entendu, les moniteurs travaillent dans le cadre on a le décret loi 116, c'est-à-dire qui réglemente la liberté d'expression et fixe les prérogatives de l'AICA, etc. Et puis, on a tous les textes internationaux, donc les traités internationaux, etc., qui aussi, on doit les prendre en considération lorsqu'on analyse un contenu. Comment on le juge un contenu correct ou offensant ou incitant à la violence, etc. Même si, je le répète, il est parfois difficile de distinguer entre un discours qui incite à la haine et la liberté d'expression, tellement la frontière, parfois, sur un certain nombre de contenus, et la frontière est très étroite. Donc, on doit être très vigilant et très prudent. Qu'est-ce qu'on a comme moyen pour faire face à ce discours? On a bien sûr un certain nombre de prérogatives. Donc, l'instance peut prendre des sanctions contre les médias qui sont responsables de ce contenu, à savoir des sanctions financières ou des suspensions de programmes, c'est-à-dire un programme peut être arrêté, suspendu pendant 2 semaines, 1 mois, 3 mois, bien sûr, dépendamment de la gravité de l'infraction. Donc, c'est comme ça qu'on essaie, bien sûr, de sensibiliser les médias et, bien entendu, à chaque fois, on les invite, on essaie de leur expliquer où est le problème, etc. Et c'est pourquoi, d'ailleurs, je disais au début de mon intervention qu'il y a eu une diminution du nombre des infractions par rapport au discours de haine. Pourtant, les premières années, c'est-à-dire 2013, 2014, 2015 jusqu'à 2016, le discours de haine et d'incitation à la haine, à la violence était très important. Maintenant, il y a un recul par rapport à ça, ce qui est très important, je pense, par rapport à ce travail de sensibilisation qui a été mené auprès des médias et des journalistes eux-mêmes sur les questions de déontologie, les questions, le cadre légal, le respect des droits des femmes, des minorités religieuses ou toute autre minorité. Etc. Donc, ça a donné des fruits, mais il faut dire qu'il faut continuer. Pour les réseaux sociaux, notre responsabilité s'étend aux réseaux sociaux qui sont rattachés aux médias traditionnels, c'est-à-dire leur page Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Mais en général, les réseaux sociaux ne sont pas sous notre compétence. Ceci dit, nous avons entamé en 2019, à la veille des élections de l'automne 2019, nous avons intenté ou mené un projet de lutte contre la désinformation, notamment pendant la période électorale, sur les réseaux sociaux et sur les médias en ligne et sur les médias traditionnels audiovisuels. Ce projet aussi a été repris pendant la Covid-19 pour lutter contre la désinformation en matière de santé, etc., etc. Et maintenant, la plateforme continue et on va essayer d'impliquer le maximum de médias et de journalistes pour qu'ils luttent contre la désinformation, parce qu'aujourd'hui, la désinformation aussi, c'est un chemin pour la lutte. La lutte contre la désinformation, c'est aussi un moyen de lutter contre le discours de haine, de violence, de diffamation, etc. Parce qu'à un certain moment, tout se mélange. Hein. La diffamation peut
and
être...
of course, it's a process, Mr. Lajmi. Of course, we are only started, unfortunately, to tackle and to be aware of what is actually a hate speech on social media. Thank you so much also for underlying how do you effectively and tangibly change the media landscape when there is an issue of hate speech and not a dialogue with regards to the intercultural and interreligious topics such as sanctions. So thank you so much for these examples. I would like now, for the last part, give the floor to Ms. Kisic, because there are also questions for her, and I would like to connect with her territory of origin and where she actually works, the Balkan region. So just it is necessary to underline that the war in this region finished only 2 decades ago. And when we are talking about the interreligious dialogue, intercultural dialogue, we have to underline also the other aspect, the politicization of religion, which is over-present in the Balkan region. So I would read the question arrived for Ms. Kisic, which is the traditional closed nature of religious communities can certainly represent an obstacle for journalists who want to report on these issues. So the question for you is, how do you think that the relationship between media professionals and religious community leaders can be improved? And my question to this observation and to this request is, how do you tackle this thing in the Balkan region? Are there any positive examples, for instance, for the interreligious and intercultural dialogue in the Balkans? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's a very rich topic. I will try to be short. Just before that, a short remark. While I was listening, Professor Rozzi, and I started this with saying how it's hard because there are so many contexts. But while listening to him, I noticed so much similarities between situation that is talking about this homogeneous image of the church that is somehow observed as unpacked and that without nuances and put into some place, and it's really very limited what church representatives should speak about. And now back to the topic. Yes, this is. I will give some very personal example. I'm now doing a book. I'm writing a book of interviews with the religious leaders and the religious representatives in the region who did a lot in terms of interreligious and intercultural dialogue. So the good part of that, there are people in the region who did a really great job, and it is very often overlooked by the majority of society, and also it is not known, or it is just put in these black and white nuances. So churches and religious communities were just part of the conflicts and never part of the peace initiative or solution, and so on. But I would say troubling, challenging part is, and that is connected with the answer on the very, very interesting question that I just got. It's that sometimes the religious representatives are afraid to speak about that, to speak about their work in terms of interreligious dialogue, intercultural dialogue, because they don't know how they will be accepted in their religious communities. And that is also a problem for a journalist, because if you need an interlocutor who knows what he's speaking about, who really does that, and he's afraid because he will be labeled by its own community as I don't know in what terms. And that when it comes to the reporting religion, how it is connected with actually politics and nationalism, and how that is often, I would say that sometimes really the religion and interreligious dialogue is some kind of, or lack of it in the media, some kind of cultural damage of this overall politicization and with this chronically intertwining of nation and religious, which I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it's not just, of course, it's not just that. And that is complicated to deal in such a surrounding. And of course, it's a very sensitive issue from the other side. So there are a lot of challenges that you have to cope with. And finally, what I also find interesting that sometimes, as I mentioned maybe in the beginning, that this is there is the way the media are controlled sometimes by the state, or are, let's say, censored, auto-censored, is important because they insist on this polarization narrative, and it goes very often on the national, on the religious lines. So we have to think about that, to be aware of that, and to be somehow awake and try to produce more of these positive examples. And finally, what considering the relationship with religious leaders and how it can be improved, I would say that we both need some kind of improving. As we spoke about education of journalists, I think it's highly important, you know, that when you're speaking with someone, you know what to ask and you know how to present that, and or to analyze or to compare. But from the other side, I would say that there are that closeness that among the religious representatives, very often some lack of self-reflection or even self-criticism. And in that terms, every critic, what is also the journalist's work, you know, to criticize, to see what is wrong, is considered as an attack. And that also poses the obstacle for reporting.
So it is, let's say, very challenging, of course, to create a dialogue between the media representatives, journalists themselves, and the religious communities where actually the war, based also partially on a religion, finished only 2 decades ago. I'm just reminding our public that Jelena Jorgačević-Kisić is based in Serbia, but she's covering the religious dialogue in the Balkans. And we are slowly approaching to an end to our panel this morning of the COPEAM annual conference, where we actually learned, as I said before, a lot of maybe we learned to pose the different questions on such a complex issue as it is the intercultural and interreligious dialogue, because we had the privilege to have this theoretical university approach of Mr. Rozzi, of Professor Rozzi, and then also some examples of how the media regulators on the Mediterranean region are actually coping with this challenge when we have also the hyper-politicization of the religious dialogue with Mr. Lajmi. And last, of course, we now just heard Mrs. Kisic talking about the challenges also today in the region, that the religion is completely or mostly connected to the political discourse. Lots of interesting questions. I would just read one which might be also the inspiring one for the continuation of this debate that arrived from Zina. She was asking, new educative channels emerged during the pandemic. So what are the new ways also to inform and to educate the youth with regards to religious and intercultural programs? Of course, the pandemic also changed the media and are approaching towards them. And of course, this discourse is evolving, and this is a process, as I said. So I would really like to thank Mr. Lajmi, Mrs. Kisic, and Mr. Rozzi for giving us a very privileged opportunity to debate on such a challenging topic as it is interreligious and intercultural dialogue. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who was attending, and for everyone who actually sent their observation and questions from home. I'm inviting you to proceed continuing this conference. We are continuing, and now I will give the floor to Mr. Claudio Capon for the continuation. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, and many thanks especially to our distinguished experts. Their contribution has been very enriching and valuable, showing us the many different features of the interreligious and intercultural dialogue. It has also provided us with ideas, at least some ideas. It's a long way to this issue of interreligious, intercultural dialogue, on how media may tackle also the problem rising especially from the spreading of prejudice and stereotypes in the internet and in the so-called blogosphere. This is an issue of particular importance for mutual understanding and respect in our Mediterranean region. And as COPEAM, we are fully committed to continue working on this subject. And I think also, having in mind the question from Zina, then in the afternoon session there will be some very interesting examples on what members of our network have done on this issue. We're now approaching the end of this morning session, and we have now a short video showing the winners of last year's COPEAM prizes that you can find in the general program of the conference. It is quite a long list, and this shows how active we have been during the year in this field.
Grâce à notre nouvelle émission, nous voyagerons ensemble dans le temps pour percer le mystère de la musique andalouse.
Hello, I'm Mouna Benamer. I just want to say thank you for the award. I'm proud to represent my country, Morocco, and la SNRT, la Société Nationale de Radiodiffusion et de Télévision. It was my first participation, and I hope it won't be the last. Thank you very much.
Dear people, I would like to express my pleasure that I took part in this wonderful contest. I had the opportunity to express ideas, artistic impulses in a small space, but also some of my views on society in general. This work about the Sephardim actually carries a latent message about all people, about the beauty of togetherness, about the integrity of the planet on which we all live. We are not all the same, we are different, but together we built one world. As an author, I was helped by a small, strong team of the Radio Television of Serbia, a media house that nurtures incredible treasures in its archives. In front of my colleagues, I say a big thank you and send a message of love, peace and mutual understanding.
Before closing this morning's session, let me thank again Rai and Simona Martorelli for hosting us again in this beautiful setting of Sala degli Arazzi. We hope to be back next year, of course, to an in-presence event. Simona, if you have to say something, please.
Well, I really hope, thank you for being with us, first of all. And I heard there were very interesting exchanges, very well moderated, by the way. And next time it has to be in person. Inshallah again, but really, we really try to do our best and host you in Rome in a proper way.
Thank you. Dear all, as you know, we have now 1 hour break before the presentation in the afternoon, a number of good practices from our members and partners. I suggest you to remain connected to Zoom and to watch a nice short film, winner of the COPEAM Prize in the framework of the film festival Les Nuits Med, the film Jeûne d'été, Summer Fasting, by Abdenour Zian, tells a story which perfectly fits with the conference topics. We show it here, good vision, and see you at 2 p.m.
Si vous êtes là pour le ventilo, je vais vous le faire payer. Ou vous m'achetez un truc ou vous filez. Kader, tu veux quoi?
Est-ce que vous avez un truc sans lactose, s'il vous plaît, madame?
Vas-y, donne-moi la définition. Bon, t'as pas de sous? Ou alors t'es au régime?
Au régime? Je suis bien là, non?
Tu fais le ramadan ou quoi? Ok. Kader, ferme les yeux. Rudy, prends ça là. Et filez. Allez, oust. Oh, ne dis pas que tu t'es converti.
Je ne suis converti qu'à l'amitié, madame. Je le soutiens en cette épreuve difficile. Enfin, pour toi, ouais.
Bon, approchez. Approchez-vous d'ici, là. Vous êtes prêts?
Alors là, je suis reparti pour le reste de la journée. On peut manger à quelle heure? 21h32. Et il est 14h29. Mais du coup, tu gagnes quoi à la fin du ramadan?
Bah, à la fin, on prie, on mange, on fait la fête ensemble, en famille.
Vous faites pas déjà ça tous les soirs?
Mais c'est pas pareil.
Oh mec, viens. J'espère que c'est pas en arabe la prière, hein. Parce que vu la tête que tu fais quand la concierge te parle en rebeu...
J'ai paniqué parce que c'est la femme de ma vie, je vois pas le rapport. Figure-toi que la prière, je l'ai prise par cœur.
Sérieux? Genre les sons? Du coup, tu comprends que dalle, non?
Mais si, toi, j'ai demandé à mon père. Je vois à peu près ce que c'est. Une insulte pendant le ramadan. Fais attention à toi, mec. Hein. Ils m'ont eu ces rascals. Tiens bon. On va devoir rester un petit moment ici. Le temps que ça se tasse un peu dehors. Ça va le coup. Tony, ça va le coup. C'est qui, Tony?
Kader! Ah, Kader! C'est du concentré de tomate, hein, c'est les petites boîtes, hein. C'est pas la pulpe. Et Kader, tu traînes pas? Ah, Rudy, t'embrasses ta mère?
Ouais.
Hein? Dis-lui qu'elle m'appelle.
Je vais voir ce que je peux faire.
Bon, et vous traînez pas, hein?
Au revoir.
Rudy, t'oublies pas de dire à ta mère, hein?
Bonne journée. Mec, j'en ai marre de marcher. Viens, on prend le bus. Allez, en bus pour nous faire rentrer gratos. En vrai, ça fait du bien de marcher. Hein. Moi, je préfère marcher. Allez. Oh, tiens! Tu vois là? Hé, monsieur! Monsieur! Arrêtez-vous! Bonjour monsieur, je savais que vous alliez sauver mes petites jambes. Salam papa.
Salam Aouldi. Tu vas où? Alors, comment ça se passe?
Ça va. Ouais, il tient bien pour l'instant, je l'ai à l'œil. Vous savez que je le fais aussi? Pas vrai? La salade, la viande, les frites, on met tout, tu vois, les tacos de folie. Les tacos, tu vois là, tu rêves. Et là, l'autre, on l'appelle le roi des tacos. Le mec, il arrive, il fait « Vas-y, c'est quoi ta recette de tacos? Donne-moi ton tacos et tout. » Je commence à faire « Ok, ok. » Bim, je prends la sauce ketchup, bim, dans les yeux. Non, par contre, tu peux pas, là. Juste là, ils font goûter des échantillons gratuits.
Mec, t'es sérieux, là? Vas-y, moi aussi, j'ai hâte. Tu me saoules.
Chacun ses faiblesses. Moi, je vais faire le tout. Toi, vas-y, si tu veux. Superman.
Celui-là.
Celui-là.
Merci.
J'ai la dalle.
Tu peux pas arrêter de te plaindre 2 minutes là. Ça saoule.
Ouais, bah, si on avait attendu le bus comme je voulais, on serait déjà arrivé, donc... C'est ballot, ça. Pourquoi t'as pas pris un pack entier?
Il restait que ça.
Ah bah là, tu peux être sûr que ton père, il va croire que tu l'as bu, hein.
T'es sérieux?
Ouais, je pense.
Ah ouais, mon père, il va pas se poser de questions. On peut pas dire que c'est toi qui l'as pris, s'il te plaît.
Non, non. Bah... C'est chaud. Après, ils vont voir que c'est moi qui l'ai bu.
Mais alors, toi, tu le fais pas pour de vrai.
Ouais, mais je t'ai promis que je le ferai. Et ma mère s'attend à ce que je tienne toutes mes promesses. C'est pour ça que j'en fais le moins.
C'est bon, j'ai compris.
Le moins possible. J'ai quoi? J'ai la dalle. Mais la dalle. C'est tout ce que j'ai? J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai quoi? T'as la dalle? Moi j'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle.
Je peux arrêter 2 minutes là, c'est bon.
Le public en redemande. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai quoi? J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai quoi? J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai quoi? J'ai la dalle. T'as la dalle? Moi j'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle, j'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle. J'ai la dalle.
Stop là! Non! Non, j'ai la dalle, c'est bon ça.
Allez. Tiens, laisse-moi regarder. Bon, je vais te mettre un petit peu de bétadine et puis ça ira très bien.
Non. Non.
Mais ça pique pas, ça fait pas mal.
Non.
Je vais te donner un Mister Freeze, t'as besoin de sucre.
C'est bon, je peux continuer. Et j'ai pas envie d'avoir la tête orange là.
T'arrêtes un peu de faire ton soldat. C'est pas grave. Ça dure 1 mois le ramadan, tu pourras recommencer demain si tu veux. Hein, on s'en fiche, t'as essayé déjà, c'est bien.
Eh oui! Tout le monde n'est pas destiné au succès, petit.
Casse-toi.
Mais comment tu lui parles?
Bouge!
Kader!
Sérieux?
T'as pas arrêté de te plaindre toute la journée là. De toute façon, tu sais même pas ce que c'est le ramadan.
C'est sûr que toi t'es mieux renseigné.
T'inquiète pas.
Ça va?
Genre quand tu pars, vous êtes séparés, et quand tu reviens, tu fais ensemble. Non, c'est promis de ne pas aller voir ailleurs ce soir. Mais une pause. Vous allez leur faire une pause, mais vous parlez tout le temps et tout. Ah, pas une pause en fait, là, une belle pause. Tu pourrais quitter le pôle juste pour venir. Genre, admettons, il faisait soit tu rentres avec ici, soit c'est fini entre deux. Tu rentres? Mais je sais pas ça.
Non.
Cool.
Non.
Ah ouais?
Non. Non. Non.
Allez.
Une meuf de ma chambre, enfin de mon étage là, je vais trop marre. Ça va te faire ça? Moi je n'en peux plus là, faut sortir moi
على دي دوش لك سعيد تليفون ديشكون صاحبك بتاع صلامبي ما عندي حتى صاحبي في صلامبيان كيفاه؟ شي تراكش قلت لك هذاك الوقت اللي تليفوني وتقول له انا ما دهناش. اسمع اسبكتور، انا ما نكذب ما نكذبش. دير دراسك تعلم تكذب على روحك، كيف لعيتك انت؟
Bonjour monsieur. On m'a dit qu'on peut manger dans cette boue.
نشكر عليكم. هذه حاجة على الدبة. تمانجي كسكس؟
Couscous?
Yes, yes, we want